Right, Roger, my lad, here we go. It's time to get the old girl out of the gig bag. We've had a sort of an overall looky over, and here we go. It's time to get the Eko Ranger VI out of the bag and get going. So after having a little conversation about what's possible and what isn't, or maybe a good thing to do and what isn't, I came to the conclusion that first of all, off came, well, the, what do you call it, that pick guard kind of fell off on its own. The reason it fell off is because there's some cracking under here, but also it's currently sitting on, it was sitting on a sort of bed of, or a thing of double-sided sticky tape, and it's made an absolute sort of sticky hell under there. Now I tried to start cleaning this up, but it was impossible. It's one of those things. There's not many things like that you can't actually do, but that was uncleanable, uppable. I think I would have had to use so much solvent to get the absolute gunge off the back of here that it would have dissolved the pickguard on its own. So what I decided to do was take the easy way out, really, unfortunately, on this, and that is to just put some new tape on, and we'll go with sticking it back down with some fresh tape on. What I will do is a bit of tidying up around the edges so there isn't sort of spillover, and hopefully I'll try and get some of this glue crud from over the years off, and it should be fairly straightforward. I don't want to take the paint off here, but there is a sort of a spillover. With a bit of luck, we'll get a fairly clean stick down again with this cleaned up. So that's off to one side. So what we decided was going to happen was that this old girl was going to get some new frets, and in so doing, it was also going to get a refresh of the fingerboard. Now these frets are really impressive for the age they are. They have worn incredibly well, and they're not actually that worn out. However, there is a lot of wear on here, and also the zero fret has got a fair bit of wear on it. Now what I'm planning to do is I'm planning to kind of mark this guitar's anniversary, if you like, with just a bit of a pretty up. And there's not a lot I can do to pretty it up, because I'm not going to be able to fix all these cracks, and I'm not even going to try and repair these bullet holes. Their quality, they're sort of the character of the guitar. What I think I'll concentrate on is refreshing this and getting this set back up so it will play really well. And so, getting rid of these worn frets will be good anyway, and also cleaning up this fingerboard after all its years of use, and then we can also at the same time clean up the bridge. Now the thing about the bridge is with the strings off, it's not looking so bad, but the bridge is definitely lifting, and realistically it's one of those things that if I just sort of see what the knife does, how far the knife goes under there, it's definitely one of the things that it will eventually come off. Although it's not got much bellying behind here, so it's not been over humidified, which is sort of slightly rare, because it's usually, the two usually go hand in hand, it seems. But anyway, it's just maybe the force of the strings over the years with the maybe weakening of the glue. So I think, looking at the shape of this actually, if we can get this off, this should be quite a good clean up and stick back down, but at the same time we can refresh this, so this and this look much newer. So I'm going to heat up my soldering iron, because we're going to commit to this now by pulling these frets. There's no nibs or bindings or overhangs at the end, so these are frets that come right to the edge of the fingerboard. Which in a way is good for us, because it means I can clean out the slots really well, so we don't have any, once we've re-radiused the board, we don't have any risk on this guitar of not seating the frets properly. It's always a slight threat if you're preserving either binding or you're preserving kind of pre-filled ends, which sometimes is quite a good thing to do. It can make it harder to get in and clean out the slot, where really the sort of best, the ideal thing you want to be able to do is to kind of get a clean cut through with a saw set to a set depth, which gives you the right width for the frets you're using, usually a standard kind of width. But it also, you know, lets you clean out the slots, so you get this nice seating. So with a clean resurfaced fingerboard plus a cleaned out slot, you get a good seat with your new frets. And I've gone for Evo Gold for this. They're going to be a very tiny bit wider and a bit higher, as in, you know, it's going to compensate for, regain, whatever. We're going to get back the get back its youthfulness in terms of height. So these are worn over the years. I think I've got my thing up here. The highest one is about down here. You're looking at about 1.18 millimeter height. Down here you're looking at about 0.99. So you can see that everything gets played heavily down here at Wares. Somewhere in the middle we've got about 110 and 102 on this side. So I've gone about, I think it is 119 or something, 120 is going to, so it's not going to be massively higher, but it will be a new, you know, it'll be even across the whole thing, so everything will feel new. So that's the starter. The other thing is this nut needs replacing because it's worn. One of the slots is worn, so it means the position of the string has wandered off, I guess, one way or another, so it's not holding it in the right position. On a guitar like this with a 0 fret, the nut slot, the nut is a sort of sideways positioning device. Sorry, put it simpler, it's what holds the strings in a particular place, and it's the 0 fret is what sets the playing action by using the 0 fret as the starter, or the kind of, yeah, it launches the strings off the 0 fret. Now I'm just giving this a little tap backwards and forwards, see if I can loosen it. I wouldn't be surprised if after all these years, I don't ever remember it being that colour originally. It could be the original has aged that colour, or it could be some, I didn't remember. Otherwise I forgot to ask Roger if he'd had it changed over the years. It could be that. The guitar has taken a knock on the headstock. I think it took Roger by surprise when I mentioned it to him. But you can see that is the case because it's taken a split along here. It's one of those things where there is a crack, and it's cracked the lacquer. It's done a little split on that side and a bit more of a shaggy split on this side. And if you really wanted to be cruel, you could probably prise that open to a point where you might be able to, or I might be able to get some glue in there. But I'm not sure, given all things being as equal as let's hope they are, I'm not really sure that it's even necessary to do that. It might be just fine to leave it as is. Now I'm just going to give this a little hammering out, see if I can persuade it to come out. It is coming out with due goo and gubbins from thousands of years of sitting there. Okay, and it's quite a challenge. Well, challenge. There's such a little tiny piece of wood behind here that it's going to be, it would be incredibly easy to snap that off. So we've got the dimensions of the nut here. Who knows what it was? I mean, you can see it's two different colours. Below the surface, it's a sort of, could be a bone, ancient bone. Above the surface, it's gone Caramac orange or something. Trump tan orange. Anyway, so even though the neck comes off here, and I think I might take the neck off anyway when it comes to, well, I will take it off when it comes to refretting, but for now I think I'll just leave it on. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to begin the irreversible process of warming up the frets, and you can see, I can see the sort of eons of grease frizzling and boiling. So I'm going to keep that one to one side because that's my 0 fret. Now on these guitars, as on the Brian May Red Special that I recently sold, the 0 fret is put in as a larger gauge fret, and this kind of basically two real takes on it. The question would be, why wouldn't it be exactly the same gauge as all the others? Well, the answer would be, look at the two cases. If we did, actually I'm going to put the rest of these on the ground so I can throw them. If we did use the same gauge as the rest of the frets, then what you get as an action is equivalent to a capoed guitar, because a capoed guitar uses the next fret in line as its nut effectively, and then the action is set off that depending on where the bridge saddle is set. If you use a bigger 0 fret than the rest, you're still using the 0 fret as that to set the height, but you're saying, okay, I'm going to go a bit above, I use as my sort of starting fret height, I'm going to go a little bit above the rest of them. So it's kind of like twice the capo. So typically if you've got an average, I say average, all things being equal, if you've got an average action down the end here, your typical capo, what do I do with the camera? Your typical capoed first fret action down at this end, near this end, tends to be around about 0.1 of a millimetre. It's very, very low. So the geometry of the triangle between the top of your first fret, your new first fret, or your nut, if you're using a capo, it turns the first fret into a nut, for example. So the geometry of the line, the straight line between that and the bottom of the bridge, and then the top of the bridge back down to that first fret, makes a triangle, and that geometry leaves you with an angle of clearance over all the remaining strings, which is around about 0.1 over the following fret. It varies. If you have a really high bridge action, then of course that triangle will change shape, and it means your action, your clearance over your new first fret, or your nut as it's serving the purpose of, obviously will change very slightly. But typically on an average guitar with an average action, a capoed action will be around about 0.1, which is tiny. Now if I choose to refret with I bought a bunch of fret, or I bought some fret wire all of the same gauge in the gold type, and if I just use that same gold down there, you'll get a very low light action on the first, or down near the nut, and it will play as if it's capoed. It will feel like it's capoed, and it will actually have this, for what it's worth, people say it changes the tone, because you're not launching off plastic or nut or bone nut, you're launching off metal fret, so it gives a little bit more of a clang to it, a metallic type of tone quality. Some say, if you listen, you could, that and playing with a sixpence and the trisonic pickups that Brian May built his guitar with, gives you a real, all those things together give you a real clangy tone, and his treble boost as well into the AC30. But you sort of add all those things together and you've got this really clanging, splintering, clean tone that he can use at times, and then kind of richen up and dirty up by adding pickups into the mix. But I guess, you know, the Eko Ranger VI like this starts out with a bit more of the sort of clanging tone, because it's beginning with a 0 fret, and that's typically the payoff of having a 0 fret. So so the question is if I were to go with a larger gauge, or duplicate the gauge of fret wire that this has currently as a 0 fret, and I can tell you from my measurement, the 0 fret stood at 142-ish on the treble edge. In fact, it was worn down a bit on the bass edge, so it was kind of 112 to 142, compared to about 120 at best for these down here. So it's about 0.2 of a millimetre difference. So you think about that, if I'm saying that using the same gauge, your first fret action will be about 0.1, add 0.2 differential on by using a bigger gauge, you're kicking off with what I would aim at as a normal action. So there's a good argument for using a bigger 0 fret, in which case I may be tempted to use a piece of jumbo nickel steel. But the downside of that, the negative on that, is that the Evo stuff is reported to be very hard, and we really want something that wears well. Alternatively, I have some stainless steel that I haven't ever used, stainless steel frets. They're pre-cut, but I could actually check and see if one of those would work, because actually it wouldn't be a bad idea to stick a stainless steel down there in the 0 fret position, because the 0 fret gets the hardest wear of all. And I'm going to take some close-up pictures of this when I've done the fret pulling, and you'll be able to see, or I'll show on my Facebook page, but I'll show the degree of notching that you get on the 0 fret. And the reason for that is quite simple, that the strings sit all the time on the 0 fret, so they're constantly making contact, whereas in the other frets they're only making contact every now and then when you play it. But they're constantly making contact, and they're also constantly in movement when you play it. So it doesn't move an awful lot. It's not like you're clanging up and down on them, but they're always in contact, but they're always moving because your fingers are moving the strings and playing with vibrato and so on and so on. So for that reason, the 0 fret gets killed off. Now, having a taller one is kind of good from an owner's point of view, I suppose, because they can go along to the tech shop and say, oh look, my 0 fret has become impossibly notched, matron, could you dress it? And the shop has an option to take, I don't know, 0.005 of a millimetre off to dress it out a little bit, and then you've still got a 0 fret that's at least the same height, or if not a little bit taller still than your rest of your frets. So there's at least a dressing's worth in that larger gauge fret. On the other hand, that changes your action. So you might say, well, okay, I can get a dressing out of it after a couple of years of playing so hard that it notches it, but in doing so, what I'm going to get out of it is a changed feel of the action at this end, which is definitely what's going to happen. So you might not want that. So the argument might be having a fret in here of the same gauge will give you a lower action to begin with. You might like that, you might not. But you could also say, well, maybe instead of dressing it, maybe I'll just replace it every time. And if for example, if I didn't use stainless, for example, let's say I wanted to redo this with the Evo Gold. I'm going to let's say I put a jumbo nickel steel fret in the first, in the 0 fret position. What I can do is I can pre-bend another one for Roger and give it to him, and say in future, just do what I did there, heat this up, get possibly you could probably do it with other tools, but these flat-ended fret pulling pliers, and just gently pull it up, and then you can tap it in with a kind of fret hammer if you're very gentle. You know, it's not impossible to press another fret in later on for a 0 fret. It doesn't have to be quite as precise as the frets in the sequence here that have to be leveled out. So anyway, you know, those are the options. I think personally, if I was keeping a guitar with a 0 fret, I would go with the view of replacing it. But the real question would be for me, do I want it at 0.3 as a first fret action, or am I cool with it being a 0.1, which is feels like a capo? And I think I would, since I normally go for a 0.3, I'd probably want to go there. Now if I can find my stainless frets, I have no idea where they've gone right now. I have to do a bit of hunting, goodwill hunting. But if and when I find my stainless, I'll do a little bit of measurement, see whether they will do the job. Failing that, I'll probably go for a jumbo fret. Anyway, that's that done. So I've got my, you won't see this very well, but there's my 0 fret with notches worn in it, and there's a comparison, the basic gauge fret, and they're clearly a different one. Not only different, this one's got much deeper tang as well, so it's come from a more of a jumbo set, but it's clearly worn down too. So I've got a range of options, but I've got as I said, I've got the golds coming for this. So now you can see, once the frets are off, actually you get quite a good look. You probably can't see as well as I can from this angle, but we've got a lot of wear happening here. There's corrosion from the finger oils, and actually it's been played a lot, this guitar, everywhere from kind of here down to there. You've got these sort of finger corrosions. Now these things they're made with quite a lot of rosewood. There's quite a lot of material here, so I have the luxury of being able to gently radius this out so that we get a nice clean fingerboard and we remove that stuff. None of it's as deep as some guitars that I've come across. So okay, there you go, some ferrules that are very loose. They're just basically ready to drop out any time of the day or night. Now I've got one that's gone for a roll over there, I can see it, which is rare. These ultimately might want to get gently tapped back in, because it isn't going to be good that they fall out every 5 seconds. They are literally hanging out. So let's flip this over, put the bits I want to keep in there, and let's gently ease out these things so that at least I know where they are. That one typically is stuck in place, that one's coming out. If it's stuck, it'll stay in there for now, that's okay, maybe. Maybe it'll come out. Yeah. Okay, so those are those. It might be worthwhile just taking these out for a minute. Since we're about it, we might as well. What I can also do is look at replacing these screws, because they're all worn. They're all a bit rusty and hanging on with their dear life. So I'll just drop them all into there for now. Yeah, there's tons of holes. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to put a mark on this to remember which are the active holes. I'm going to do it with a little tiny bit of gold pen, just so I know. That's what I'm going to do with gold pen. Work, damn you. Yeah, so it's so I know on each one, just one marker, so I can tell which way these, which one's not to fill, basically, is what I'm looking for. God, lovely old thing. The original Eko Ranger VI, when it came, it had open tuners and white pegs, so simple. So these are really a little bit worn out, but still we can freshen them up. With these, there's not really a particular need to replace them with anything. They seem to be working pretty well. They might benefit from a bit of grease inside them, but there was no problem in their operation. So let's get this off. Now what I'll do with the nut, I'll use this yellow piece of something as a guide, as a template for making a new one. It's gonna, the only downside, it's going to look a little bit fresh because it's going to be bone as opposed to anything else. I could probably hunt around and possibly find some aged material. Now, this has been extremely hard done by. Whoa. We're at nearly full tilt. I'm not sure even if in my lifetime of ownership these ever came off, but look at that. Massive goo. It's probably grains of sand from my beach adventures in the past still stuck in there. Now I'm just going to turn this over very carefully, because what I want to see is if there are any factory fitted shims rocking about in here, and there aren't, but wow, I don't recall ever seeing underneath here. Look at that. Looks like it's the first time that's been off, I would guess. And what we've got something under here that's rattling about that looks like a shim, but I don't, maybe it came off the back. I think it would have come off the back edge, but I think it appears, I don't know if it's fallen off before now. I can see where it's come from. So it has a little shim that I can see. It's it's quite amazing. It's actually literally hanging off the back edge of the block here. I don't know if you can see. The block is cracked. That's one thing. And there's a little shiny bit where this shim belongs, dangling off the back. So I will need to sort of re-glue that in that same place when we come to put it back. We've got a little gap opening up here in the body which we can get some glue into, and we can probably glue into this crack as well. I'm not for sure if that's going to make a hell of a lot of difference. it's obviously holding up okay for what it is. Yeah, good old girl. Simple enough. They were built like tanks. Now the getting off of the bridge is a slightly worrisome thing, because there's probably a locating plug here, a peg under here. Yeah, it's like a rivet, and I'm not entirely sure if that means we can even get it off. Can we see what's under? I might have to have a closer look. So, wow, holy moly! Okay, we've got a. Roger's fitted a. I didn't even know this. He's fitted a jack plug under here. So he's got a transducery thing in the bridge. Yeah, so this is interesting. We've got this riveted on bridge, which is a smart move really. But even there, it's starting to lift, which means what's happened over here? Ah, right. Okay, the rivets come away. So maybe we should just respond with the same treatment, but that we'd have to get a plate, some other batten under there to use as a kind of base for the rivet. So theoretically, we might find this rivet is just ready to leap out, depending on how well tightly it fits into the wood. But if it's the little domey rivety bit has definitely broken off. But I'll get my little camera in there with a torch, hopefully. That's I'm going to do a bit of research on that. I mean, the reality of this is that I'm obviously not going to want to rip this bridge off if it's not going to come off, and if it's not likely to fall off. That's the main thing. We've got this crack here. This is a sort of a bit unstable. Well, it could just pull out in one go if we weren't careful. A small bit of laminate, but you know, it's not completely knackered. This is what wood this is. It's hard to know. We've got strap button hole drilled right through there. This is a small crack. It's actually not that bad, but I might want to put a little plate on the back there and maybe resin it in place just to make sure that I glue it and do a little clamp of some sort, and then maybe on top of that put a little resin plate so that it just strengthens it and allows that to bite a bit harder. And we get some glue into there and clamp that shut a little bit. Yeah, wow, what an old thing, eh? I mean, start by slowly cleaning up the bodywork to try and get it a little bit nicer generally. Now I'm just trying to find some I don't want to attach anything to there, so let's see if the string will go through here so I can just hang it out of the way safely. And so it will. Let's have a look. Want to do that? No, I don't want to do that actually. It's not heavy, but I think I don't want to put any pull onto that particular bridge of wood. So what I'll do is I'll use a stand like that and just leave her there like that, and I'll hang this baby from somewhere else. This is going back in the house anyway, so I don't have to worry too much about overcrowding. Okay, so we have the neck, the old girl. Let's take this truss rod cover off just for fun and see what we've got. Partly because before I start doing any re-sanding to clean up this fingerboard, I want to make sure that the neck is straight, so that we take an even amount off. You can basically flatten it in any shape you want, or from starting point that you want, but it makes sense to start with it as straight as possible. Wow, look at that old styly. Here we go. So I'm going to do some research in the meantime on this bridge, and what you do if the rivets start to fail. But as you can see, this is, I'm going to get some goo, a bit of slime on here to clean this neck a little bit. And I'm going to make a hell of a lot of rosewood dust shortly anyway, but I just want to get some of the sort of older goo off here. And you can see quite a lot of cracking in the lacquer from way times gone by. What I think I'll do is I'll also probably plenty of nicotine coming out there as well. Because back in the day, Roger and I both smoked like chimneys for a while, I guess, when we were younger. What I do like is that the lacquer on this does look a hell of a lot more robust, and it looked it in the day. It was a really rich, lustrous finish compared to lots of other guitars of the era, and certainly compared to that sort of strange sticky stuff that happened on Taylor Babies that I've had through. When you start to clean them up, the finger grease over the years seems to have kind of sweat has dissolved the lacquer, or what little lacquer there was on there. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to check the straightness and adjust it and see if the actual truss rod works. I mean, this is no frets on here anyway, so I'm just going to pretend there are and see what we've got. So it's a little bit convex at the moment, so I'm going to put a key in here and do a little bit of adjustment. So I want to slack it off a little bit if I can. It's a weird old thing. How do you do it? How do you do the adjustment? Can you do it? Sort of, maybe. There's no way of really getting into it in any other way, so you've got to be able to use these little adjustment holes, or you can't do anything. Right, well, it's for adjusting anyway. Wow. Come on, catch up. Let's look at the gaps. Look at the gaps. A little tail floaty bit of fingerboard at the end there is it's just a tiny bit starting to come in over the years. It's just not curving in a bit, yeah, a little bit bent, but it's not going to be a problem. Now with this, planning to refret this, it's going to end up getting a bit of a fret level at the end anyway. Obviously that's something I would always do with new frets anyway. So, but I wouldn't normally do in an acoustic setup. I wouldn't need to do normally in an acoustic setup, because I can usually get a good improvement out of an acoustic, a good action improvement, without hitting the zone of uneven frets, which is excellent. I'll put these in the box with loads of other frets and make a collection of them. Okay, so we're pretty much flattened out now, and what's nice is, after all these years, there's no twist at all in this. It's absolutely perfect still. Now I'm going to do a little check to see what the actual radius was in its day. Take off my temporary sandpaper, which was used for other little things. What do we guess this to be? I reckon this is a 9.5. Yeah, not far off. Is it 7.5? No. I don't think so. Is it? Oh, you know what? You jolly well know what. It jolly well is. Or is it compounded? These little devils, they've done it compound. Now, I bet you that wouldn't be anywhere in the paperwork. It's a typical thing. bet that wouldn't be in the paperwork. And in fact, it's probably, by the time you get down here, it's probably, is it as, no, it's still, is it a 10? No, 9.5. So is it 7.25 down here? That's a pretty big gap there. That's not 725. Is it 925? I'm just looking for the light coming through. Yeah, well, I guess it's the nearest I could say to this is it goes from 7.25 to 9.5. So 725 is that lovely vintagey sort of thing. But the problem is in refretting this, I can't refret to a compound radius. So if I'm going to do anything to it, if I'm going to recondition the fingerboard, then it will have to be to a single radius. And unfortunately, the question is the experience of it mostly a 725, or is it more of a 9? I can see gaps through here. That's from the corrosion in the fingerboard. It's more rolled over than 9.5, which it sort of gets down to around about the, not even there really. It's only 9.5-ish around about here. Now, for all I know, it could have begun life as a 9.5 or similar, but years of playing could have rolled it off. But I think that right now, the experience of this guitar will be kind of in the realms of 725, which is what I'm going to do it to. Just going to check that we haven't gone concavex. No, we were slacking off. We don't want to go concave. That's still pretty good. Yeah, so I'm going to go into 725 all the way on this, which is a cool choice. What it also means, if I can find it, what it also means is that, as it happens, my stainless steel frets, wherever I can find them, happen to be 725 already. So if they're the right size, I could use a stainless one straight off in the roll of 0 fret, which I can see has got a bigger slot already. Alright, so the fun part now is to get this going. What I really want is, let's go on for a walk. There's my 80. I'm going to start with 40, which is pretty heavy duty. I'm going to take a piece of 40, and I'm going to actually, what I'm going to do for this is I'm going to double-sided sticky tape it to the block. Hello, sweetie. Roger's old guitar with the neck off. Just stick it on there for me. There would be good. No, there. Yeah, it's a fabulous old critter. But I was just looking at the radius on it to see you know what the curvature was, and it turns out to be a really vintage old sort of round, very very tight radius. So on this it's not so much a problem, because if it's electric it means you can't get the bends at the top end and stuff, but on this it just gives it a really nice old styly feel. But it goes down to about 9.5, so I don't know if they built it compound, but it's in effect is now compound. It changes over the distance, but I'm going to do it all at 7.25, which means it's going to take some more off here than it will there, but c'est la vie. Yeah. Whole thing.
You've got your DNA on it somewhere.
Yeah, I've just wiped it off along with a load of nicotine and stuff.
Yeah, but that helps it play better.
It sure does. I was going to do some routing, but do you know what? I can't be bothered.
It's quite cold out there.
Yeah, that's why.
Yeah, it's kind of, I was surprised that it got colder since this morning.
I think I'm just going to stay in here and do a bit of this.
There's a pheasant was out there scratching and stuff.
Really? I haven't seen him for ages.
Yeah, I know. He's just doing his voice.
Oh yeah, so we've got to be indoors for what time tonight? What?
You're looking for that.
What?
Where?
What is that? Oh yeah. I have got your what do they call that thing? Baking thing.
Yes, I need that the other day as well. To get the mince pies out and they all go.
Sorry.
What do you use it for?
I use it for pulling bridges off guitars and things.
Oh right. Is it useful?
Yeah, but I was going to planning to remove the bridge on Roger's guitar until I discovered that it's actually held on with 3 rivets. Well, one of them, I think one of them's failed, hence it's lifting. But I've not had to deal with a guitar with rivets on the bridge.
That's unusual, isn't it?
Yeah, I've not seen one. I don't think I've noticed one anyway. But, hey, well.
Well, so I bequeath it to you.
Thank you.
Because I'm not sure I really want it back after you.
So, okay.
Right.
I'll come in a bit for a break, I think.
Yeah.
See you in a little while. Yeah, I was going to route out another guitar body, but I don't know. I'm not quite sure I feel up to it today. It's a bit of a kind of a bit like wrestling with a hungry lion at times. Anyway, so this is my kind of temporary stick-on sandpaper, and this is gonna really attack this fingerboard kind of full on really, but it will get down, it will do the heavy work, and then we'll sort of go to a gentler. This double-sided tape is so fantastically useful, as Roger knows from having held his pickguard on for the longest while with it. But for this kind of thing, it means I can just stick any grade of paper I want on this radius block. Actually, this is pretty much all I use these radius blocks for anymore. So it's pretty much just almost entirely for the purpose of sanding necks. So that gives it a good chance of being the right radius. If you just put it on loose, I found that the looseness of it can sort of add to a bit of vagary in the shape of your radius. Now this is fun. This is where it starts to get fun and messy. So I'm gonna get me a little bit of support there. Not that. Okay. I won't stay on camera for this for too long. So I've got a bit of support there, and I'm going to clamp down the headstock at this end just to help a little bit by keeping it kind of stable. Try and get it so that it's not too bad. It's just to stop it moving so I can push a little bit into it. And then I'm going to begin by doing this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go off, drink my tea, listen to the radio, do all the sanding on here and come back when it's sanded. Oh, magic! Okay, just a quick catch up. We have got we've got the bit of the body that's come, or a bit of the whatever that's called, the ply, no, you know, the finish top body laminate that's coming away here is being glued and clamped. It's all had a quick clean over, so it's got some of the grime taken off. Actually, some of these holes in here probably go some way towards closing them up from the inside out. Not completely, but you never know. We might be able to sort of just, you know, probably put some resin in there and just strengthen it so that it won't break any further. Same with over here. Yeah, it's kind of pressed all the way through. So best thing you could do with that to strengthen it would be to sort of stick some resin in it. Yeah, so currently it's a bit cleaner. I've put the pickguard back on with double-sided tape. nicely positioned. Going to go and do a bit of research on this. Can't really see into there without the miracle of the camera, which I'll use in a minute and use the phone to throw some light in there. But the lifting isn't terribly bad, but it is indicative of what appears to be what Roger's got here. Actually, it's not a under saddle thing, it's a piezo, stick-on piezo. But what we've got here is what feels like a broken rivet, but I could be wrong, in which case maybe with some clamping and some gluing again, because I don't really see a way of getting these rivets out. Two of them feel pretty solid. This is one of them feels like it might be pulling up. It's tricky because I reckon that way the only real way out would be to drill this one out and maybe try and replace it or replace them. But once you've kind of weakened the material around it, it's not going to grip very well, is it? So it could be that we end up kind of just accepting where it is. What I was interested to see was whether there was any adjustment still. There's quite a bit of adjustment available in here, so there is loads of room. So you never know. This could be. What I might do, if it comes to it, if the rivets are strong, i.e. on the positive side they're holding everything in place, but they're kind of a bit weakened around the back one here, what I might still do is I might squirt some glue into there, nonetheless I still clamp it down, and then we'll just work with the bridge adjustment here, because actually even if we got back a bit of a little bit of action from there, we're not desperate for action here, because we've got this adjustable saddle piece, which is one of the wonderful innovations of these Eko guitars, which is this little thing here, which eventually should come out and the whole thing. Now this could do with a clean up anyway, so let's take it out. It's also I don't think it works very well with an under saddle piezo of any kind. I don't think you could do one under there, to be honest. But anyway, we'll give that a clean up, and I'm just going to make a mark here because I'm not entirely sure which is which. I'm going to put a T for treble at the top end of this so I know what I'm looking at, and I'll also put a dot on this little bit here so I know it's a treble one, just in case the threads are different. No, not likely they are, but that's not in bad condition. What's great is you get under here and you can actually see the original finish sitting through there. But hey, okay, so yeah, that may be the option. I've got some new clamps coming anyway, which could solve the problem of clamping this down. The big long things that I've got here are never any good for this type of bridge work because they're too darn long, and the bridge is only about 5 inches back, so you end up, no matter what happens, is you end up with your actual clamping bit too far back, so you can't use them. Well, I've had to in the past, but I've got a couple of shorter ones, but they're hellishly hard to get. Anyway, so there we are. That's that setting. The next thing I'm going to do is going to glue and clamp this little split in here, and then basically just sort of keep on having a look. I might even get the vacuum cleaner in here. I'll do that now. Get rid of some of the fluff in here. Put our friend Henry in there. Grime. 37 years grime coming out. I will get the camera in the back end for a bit of a look in a minute now. Well, I suppose you can. Oh yes, you just stay on there. Now, what I have to do first is throw some light. No, that's not going to be the way to do it. Throw some light in there. Oh god, how many holes we got in here? Oh yeah, that one. let us throw some light in there. I'm looking at, what am I looking at? I'm looking at the rivets. Excuse me. Let's go. There we go. Look at the rivets. Can you see it? It should be about 10 centimetres away. Let's have a look as close to the look as we can see. There's a split that runs through the rivet actually, the rivet hole, so that may have something to do with this. Anything else in there that's interesting to look around at? It's not that bright, is it, with that torch, but it's a bit of nothing. You can see the piezo, I think you can probably see the piezo pickup coming off there. Not the best kind, really. Don't think so, anyway. Right, well, let's see what happens. We'll take it inside, take a look, and do a bit of research. Okay, Rog, here we go. I just jumped ahead a bit because I was on the Skype call, no, whatever, Facebook call. 0 fret going in here. Now, I've gone stainless steel, but what I've just realised is, I'm not sure how much bigger, it is a bit bigger, but it will be a very fine action. But I've got my gold frets lined up here, they're beautiful. When I was cutting them, I noticed they're more brittle than the regular nickel steel jobs, so that's going to be an interesting thing. See how they work, how to work them. Yeah, so there's my 0 fret gone in. Just gonna if I can scrape up any excess glue, but I tend to end up cleaning up the glue with blade. It's usually the easiest way, but that's looking pretty good. Now, I don't have it. It must be in the house. My digital caliper thing to measure the actual height of this. But anyway, we'll just carry on. If it isn't the right action, then I'll lose the stainless and I'll go for something bigger. But it will be, obviously, it'll have to be a jumbo fret with nickel steel, so it's not going to be as hard wearing. Anyway, so here I am chucking some glue into the slot, and here we go with the first of the Evo Golds. Beautiful, man. Now I'm just, oops, I probably should have done a little prep on this slot actually. I'm just going to think it through in a minute once I've done this one. Yeah, I could do with a little bit of preparation work. Next one, I'll just stop and have another go at it. It's quite a tight fit, it felt like. So what I might do on the other ones is just run a little, just start a slot at the top just to make sure that it goes in, seats in perfectly well. Again, I didn't do a direct measurement comparison with the tang thickness on this stuff, but it measured up a standard as far as I could see, so there shouldn't be a problem with it. There goes my glue. Luckily it's thick. I just did something that I don't often do on YouTube, and that's hide somebody from the channel. Whoa, look at that. There's something that I don't quite understand. You know, you get somebody comes on your, well, I do understand, I suppose, but you get someone who comes on your channel or comes and watches some of your 2-hour video or whatever, and then they decide that they don't like your style, and instead of engaging in any kind of communication, they just leave a shitty message, and I really hate that. I hate that about YouTube, and I hate that about people who use YouTube, I have to say. It's a real shame, and it makes for a pretty miserably unpleasant world. So these days I just don't even bother. I just zap them, and I set them to hide user from channel. Whether they are really nice people who just have some communication issues or not. I don't care anymore. It's life's too short to be kind of looking through ignorant comments, and comments, you know, basically designed to make the world a worse place than it was 5 minutes ago. What the hell's the point of that? I don't know if it's an age thing or just a personality thing. I just don't have time for it. I never did as a kid, and I don't have time for it now. And in my life, I just ignore it and leave it behind. And on Facebook or YouTube or whatever, I'll do the same, because it really is, there's not enough time to get sort of hung up on miserable people and what they want to do, or how they want to make you feel, or drag you into their kind of negativity. So if you happen to be one of those people who comes on my YouTube channel and says something really critical or snotty to get a rise or a reaction, and then you kind of feel like I don't really pay you much attention after that, then it may be because I've hidden you from the channel, and you basically, I think it means you'll end up carrying on talking to yourself more than anything, and that's kind of how it should be, really. I'm just going to give this another slam dunk for a minute. This I'm just looking at this one. There's a little bit of a roll on the fingerboard, so let's see if I can make sure this stays right down flat. Otherwise, it will just get taken off on a bit of fret leveling if necessary. It's the first fret. It may just only be the difference between the 0 fret top that I'm looking at and the first fret. So let's carry on. Right. So what I've done is I've given it a little bit of an opening to get the fret tang seated, and I'm dropping a bit of glue all the way along, really, in this one. I just want it to catch partly in the tang, but I also want it to catch underneath the crown of the fret. Now I've got to think ahead, because when I get to the other end, I've got this quite a long overhang on this this kind of neck. That's not a bad fit, actually. I've got a big long overhang, so I'm going to need to get a wooden block and support that. Otherwise, the clamp is going to break it, which obviously I don't want. So I have to prep something up to do that. And once this is refretted, and once I've trimmed off all the frets with the edging block, then what I'll do is hand finish them with some foils, and then finally re-oil the fingerboard or tidy up any glue with the blades, very careful use of a blade, and then end up with an oil to darken it again. Just having a sort of quick look at how it's sitting. Yeah, that's cool. Again, can't quite get all the way into the sides to get any excess out, but I can try. Oh, I've got a cut on my finger, which has decided to bleed. Yeah, there was a whole thing on the radio this morning about a bunch of commentators sort of saying, why is it that what's happened since the old Brexity thing, you know, they're bemoaning how as a nation or something the Brits seem to have lost the ability to discuss things without resorting to abuse. And I think it probably has some to do with things like the issue of Brexit, but I think it has a lot to do with, this is interesting, we just about fit on here. It also has to do with, I think, the kind of social media, you know, the YouTube generation, and just how tempted people are to fire away from their keyboards and you know, insult people from a distance. You know, and I think it's one of the first things I noticed when I started using YouTube, just how quickly anything would descend, any discussion would descend into hatred. I mean, absolute hatred. I think I remember looking at some spiritual guru or someone that I really respected for their philosophical stance, and just being astonished that underneath this amazing person's work or words was this war of kind of bigotry and outright xenophobia and racism. I mean, in the truest sense, you know, people, you know, sensing somebody was someone was American, so hate, you know, insulting them for being American, and somebody had a foreign sounding name, so insulting them for being an Arab or something. And it just I couldn't believe how it was in the same, it was all in the same place as this this philosopher's stuff, you know, which was all about completely spiritual, spiritual is the wrong word, but you know, kind of personal growth and awareness and stuff like that. And yet in the same space, you've got the sort of the best of humanity in the words that his stuff deals with, or the subject his stuff is dealing with, and then depressingly in the comments you've got the worst of humanity just kicking off, trying to start wars right there and then. So I find it really, comments is horrible. You know, and I've said on a few of these videos before that I've been, I was going to say lucky, it's not the right word, but I've been relatively lucky in that, having decided from the outset that my whatever control I may or may not have over a YouTube channel, one thing I didn't want it to be was a place for slagging people off or being slagged off. And as far as I have any right to say anything, I would insist that, you know, that's how I wanted to be treated, and basically if people don't respect that, then they just get hidden and they can rant on till the cows come home on their own, basically. Because I think the thing is, if you don't decide for yourself what you will accept in the world around you, your immediate environment, whatever that is, whether it's a YouTube channel or a Facebook page or your home or your club or whatever, if you don't decide that, then nobody else will. It'll just default to whatever the lowest common denominator wants to do, and usually that's somebody with something to prove, or somebody very negative who just wants to bring everyone down to their level. So anyhow, so this is I'm just thinking, I'm trying to think through, you know, this this guitar history and things I've done with this guitar in the past. I mean, I suppose the nice thing about it was selling it to Roger in the first place was kind of keeping it in the family, keeping it with a friend. So it's not often, I suppose, you get to do that. It's often, you know, you often say goodbye to a guitar for good, but at least I knew, you know, Roger was enjoying this guitar. And I think the first trip this guitar came on with me was I went to France with some friends, from school friends, in, I think it was the summer of 1981. And we went down to the south of France into the mountains to a kind of ski resort that was off season, so it was obviously cheap, and we got to hang out there for very little. While I'm here, I'm just looking at this thinking, how am I going to build this up to protect it So ideally I need a block of wood that's going to fit perfectly in one go, which would be a bit of a miraculous lucky strike if that were the case. Close. That's very close actually. Yeah, so we went to the south of France in 1980. Was it 81? 81 maybe. And travelled all the way across France on the rail system, and Martin, who I went with, a friend of mine, one of the friends I went with, had exactly the same guitar. Look at that, perfect fit. I think we'll get away with that. Yeah, so Martin had one as well. So there were, I remember the two of us playing, him and his, and me and mine, playing on the balcony of this apartment that we rented for the week. Was it a week or 2 weeks? I can't remember. But we were mighty young and naive, and I guess we were there with, I don't know about the others, but with pretty much one thing on our minds, or two things actually, booze and girls. And we got plenty of one, and as typical school kids we didn't get much of the other one. Well, maybe not typical. But yeah, it was good. And it was sunny up in the mountains, so we were kind of sat around a lot drinking Cronenberg, I seem to recall, and playing Irishy type songs on the guitar, or Simon and Garfunkel songs, because I think Martin, who had the other one of these, and I were both Beatles fans, so we kind of connected on that. And the school I went to was a kind of Roman Catholic school in Coventry, so there was definitely an Irish folk music kind of slant to it. So that's one an earliest trip I remember taking this old girl, and I remember I think we both, in those days, I don't think there were none of these fabulous padded gig bags in those days. I don't know if you can kind of remember, late 70s, early 80s, but if you had a guitar bag, it was usually that sort of cheap PVC, soft PVC kind of thing, which just about protected the bag from, you know, dust and maybe the odd scratch, but really offered it no protection. But thankfully these EKOs or Ekos or whatever they were called, they were so solidly built that they survived our 2-week interrail journey without any problems at all. And this, I think I remember taking this. I think I took this to Florida in 1982. I remember I had a photograph. Old style photograph of, I think, of me and my sister and my mum arriving just after we arrived at the airport in Orlando, I think, and no, it was Miami, and we'd gone up into the multi-storey car park, and we were just sort of standing by the car ready for the off for our next part of the journey, and there's a sort of shot of me in my pink summery, it's got a bit too much glue here, my pink t-shirt, and holding my guitar. And I think I also had a ghetto blastery thing, which was I'm trying to think what make it was. Maxell? No, that was the tape, wasn't it? Technics, something like that. Anyway, yeah, I remember that picture, holding that guitar, or it's standing up on its bottom end. This guitar, I should say. So that was played that throughout that stay. I can't remember how long I stayed there, but then I came back and then went out same year, no, late the next year. went to Trinidad, but I didn't take this, and I can't remember where this went. Maybe I'd already sold it to Roger. Roger would know better than me when I actually sold this, but by 1983 I'd bought myself the Squire, and I took that with me to Trinidad, and I remember playing that whilst driving up the winding roads to Maracas Bay, which is the sort of the touristy beach. But I remember my stepdad at the time, who I was supposed to be working with, which was an adventure in itself, a bit of a disastrous adventure, but remember him driving up there and me kind of playing the Squire with the headstock sticking out of the car window. But yeah, so this was stashed somewhere, but I can't really recall that, so I think I must have sold it. Maybe I had this idea that I sold this to Roger way later on in the 80s when I lived in London, but if I did, then I have no idea where it went between 1982 and then. Like I say, he'll know better than me. Anyhow, it travelled a little bit and survived its journeys. But I was always amazed, now looking back, I'm totally amazed that it got across the Atlantic a few times. I think most of the time, in those days, I think I've said this before, but most of the time you'd walk onto the aircraft and sort of blackmail the stewardess into letting you park this somewhere. I don't know, it wouldn't be the overhead thing because it's too big, but they'd prop it up somewhere and mutter a little bit. But nowadays you'd never get away with that. You'd be charged extra, or they'd tell you to put it in the hold. But those days you could do it. And I think there might have been a couple of times when I'm pretty sure I couldn't get away with that, and they just put it in the hold, and I'm pretty sure I can remember sending this off down the baggage thing at the check-in desk without any further padding or protection. So I think I just sent this off in its PVC case, and miraculously it survived and it came out intact at the other end. But those were I know I said this earlier on, but there were amazing times where in that era you could go up and ask to see the cockpit and sit, the captain was the crew were in a gregarious mood. They'd let you sit up there and watch them running the show, and it was quite amazing. I have memories of being in the middle of the night going, I can't remember that, I guess it would be coming back from somewhere from the States, but I remember sitting in the cockpit looking at the moon light on the tops of clouds from out of the front of I guess it was a 747. It's an experience that nobody but pilots and YouTube subscribers get to see these days. But it was amazing. And they never, I don't think they ever did so much as asked me if I'd been drinking, or they made an assessment right there and then, and if you didn't seem to be a nutcase, you'd go up and captain would chit chat for a bit, and you'd get a feeling after a while that they wanted to be left alone, and then you'd sort of thank them and head back to your seat. Now I've reached a point where I can't do that, so I have to do that, but then I'm going to have to do a bit of this as well. Let's have a look. Yeah, we'll just get away with that. Come on, down you go. No, this is a different shape altogether, so my fabulous little rig isn't going to get anywhere near hooking up onto this. Just looking at where this sits. I may be able to just eke out some of the spilt or excess glue, but I may have to scrape this out later. But yeah, so this one, I'm trying to think of places I remember playing it, but or things I remember playing on it. I do remember playing it in my mum's house in Florida. I can remember. I think I do actually. I know why I remember, because my stepdad, her husband, I think I'd got this is part of what he was trying to do as a business was he was exporting Betamax video players. I was telling Elliot, my son, this story the other day, but he was exporting or buying Betamax video players in Florida, and the plan was to sort of take them down to Trinidad in the Caribbean, and which is where I was born and my mum's family and he were from. So we take them down. The idea was we take them down to Trinidad and sell them to local people down there. And where was I going with that? Oh yes, so it was in the very early days of video technology, of course, Betamax, and he also, at the same time, I think he'd somehow come by one of the first portable video cameras, or consumer video cameras that Joe Public could buy, and we had it in the house. And I remember for a long time there existed a video of me sitting in front of a whole set of microphone-y things and connected up to this camera. Let's see if I can hook this on here without the thing shooting off. If this shot off from the bottom, I'd be dead. Yeah, so there was a clip of me, I think, sitting with my bare-chested teenager with my fabulous long centre-parted American style hair. I suppose it would be, in this day and age, it would be Harrison Ford, late 70s haircut. And yeah, I was trying to record myself playing some songs. And I think if I remember, I was playing, probably would have been playing, in fact, I'm pretty sure I was playing some Pink Floyd songs and some Eric Clapton, who I think I'd kind of recently discovered, so, you know, belatedly. But I'd found slow hand and just loved it, which I think is that's probably another reason why I was pretty much always destined to be a Strat player more than anything else. But yeah, so there was a bit of video of me playing this guitar. I was playing, I don't even know what the title of the track is called, but it was off Slow Hand. It was one of the very slow tracks, a sort of soppy love song. I could play it better. There's no need to think that I won't stay. Haven't I been with you all the way? This could be the time for you and me. That one, if you know it. Badly sung, but I remember playing that on this guitar. Squeeze it on, come on now. So we're squeezing against hard solid wood again, which is fine. We can put quite a lot of welly into it. This fretting business, obviously it's I don't know if you can see, there's a pile of used kitchen roll building up, because obviously I use a bit every time I squeeze a fret in. I'm trying to clean up some of the excess, but to be honest, it's not really working right now, because yeah, what I'm seeing is that the edges of this are just a little bit rolled over away, you know, a bit tighter than the 7.25 inch radius. So I could either sort of try and overpress them a little bit, or I could leave them seat where the natural radius of this gold Evo stuff is going to, and then just let it set that way, and then there's just a tiny mismatch between the actual edges of the fingerboard and the frets, but what you get is a nice radius, playing radius out of it, because nothing moves, it stays where it needs to stay. Okay, so I'm kind of heading into this flat block here, so I've got loads of loads of support for a heavy pressure. Yeah, so this is I really loved this guitar. You know, it was my first proper guitar. I had a guitar when I was about 6. I remember I was living in Falmouth, down this part of the world actually, in Cornwall, near the sea, right next to the sea. And when I was a kid, my foster mum, I didn't have a very standard upbringing, but my foster mum had brought me I guess it was a classical, actually you know what, I think it was a steel strung, kind of bit of a toy western-y style guitar, which I never took too seriously as a guitar, but I was always kind of messing around with musical things, so I enjoyed making noises with it, but I never set out to learn it as an instrument as such. But yeah, that was my first ever guitar, and then the Satellite was my second, I guess, and this is my third. But compared to the Satellite, this was the first real guitar, and you know, it had the build that was convincing, whereas the build on my Satellite Strat flavoured toy copy was just thoroughly uninspiring. You know, you really I was playing next door, but yeah, you really thought it was going to break at any moment. And this, on the other hand, was, you could sit on it and it would be fine. And this also, I don't know whether you can see, but this also has just this beautiful big quilted, you know, grain pattern on the back, and it's a lovely wood. And, you know, and you could feel that the joints where the top and the sides were jointed were just rock solid. So it's kind of my introduction to solid, dependable instruments, and I think it was a good introduction for a couple of reasons. One of them being the 0 fret, which did away with any high first fret action problems in those first few years of playing. So whereas I guess other people may have been struggling with a ridiculously high first fret action thanks to a badly fitted plastic nut, which most guitars of that era came with, this thing here was kind of defaulting to a really nice low first fret action, you know, by courtesy of this 0 fret business. I'm looking at this now and I'm thinking this may only, I don't know, that may just be just big enough. It's a little bit bigger than the Gold, but all told I may want more height, in which case I will resort to using jumbo wire, which will give us the extra height at the cost of hardness. What I don't know yet is how this stuff works, you know, right at the edges when we come to bevel it and file it down. I might manually take most of it off before I use this shaping sanding block thing. I use a file by hand. I'm being a bit messy with this glue, but that's okay because we'll go back over the whole thing. I just guess I'm aiming for gripped frets above all else. So it's a slow process, and in a way this is, it's tipping over now. It's sometimes when you've got a bolt-on neck, this part in some ways is the easiest part. This is tipping over. Yeah, in some ways this is the easier part because you're just going along pressing everything in, going and trimming it and filing the edges and stuff can be the difficult, the harder bit. Let's see if I can just get this to seat it in first. No, it's trying to go sideways. It's got a natural, unnatural tilt. So I'm going to do some quick thing here before it sets. I'm going to use the insert, if I can get it out. And I'm going to use the hammer here. And I'm going to try and just get it bedded in here first. Okay. No, it doesn't want to go. Yep. Kind of difficult to do because it's sort of bouncing a bit. I don't want to hit it with anything else other than this call, which I'll put it back in. I have to lock it back in before I can use it, which is taking time and it's slow and fiddly. I might get a chance of squeezing this down now. Come on. Ow. It doesn't want to do it. So I'm in danger now of having this thing refusing to go in, and I don't really know why that is. So I'm going to change it around and see if I can persuade it to go in this way. Now I have got some spare. I'm going to try and give it a little help this way, but it really, it's not behaving. I don't really know why. Let's see if I can give it the full welly. That's gone in. Just double check. Yeah, that's seated. That was a not very encouraging. I don't like that when it happens. Let's just make sure it stays down. Now, approaching the overhanging bit, I'm going to try and figure out how best to stick these bits. I might use some double-sided tape just to make sure that they stay in place instead of having to hold them by hand. Let's have a look. What's it doing? Yep. I don't know what the actual tonnage that this press exerts, but it's quite a lot. Now, right now, I'm not even going to worry about the excess glue. I'll come back and scrape that away at a later date. It's only a nicety, really. So I've got two more I can do before I have to put in this little overhang support. So yeah, anyway, I think I got lucky with this guitar because, firstly, because it had the 0 fret, and I didn't know it at the time. I just knew that it was just quite easy to play. And then the other aspect was it has a adjustable bridge saddle, which was it's just like an amazing innovation on an acoustic guitar, especially a budget one that was a lot of schoolboys and girls' first guitar. So to have something that you could adjust and get a really pretty good playing action out of, without having to go and grind away at saddles, bone saddles and so on, which I never did because I didn't know how to do it, or I wouldn't have risked it. So that was a real smart move by Eko in those days. And then I think the only thing I didn't like about it was because it was so strongly built, it did have, I thought it had a fairly relatively dull tone. I mean, it was nice, but it didn't have the sort of high sparkle tinkling that a lot of other acoustic guitars that you'd come across other people owning. So it did feel a bit agricultural compared to some other brands of guitars. And I think eventually it's kind of part of the reason why I think I got rid of it in the end, because I got fed up of its I suppose you would call it, it was a warm tone, you know, but it wasn't, it didn't sound like, you know, you play along to stuff on the, oh, how did that work? I'm a fret short. Uh-oh, got one knocking about here. Yeah, so you play along to something, you know, record, and it just didn't have the range that even, you know, recording, I don't know, Wish You Were Here or something, you know, it was just much mellower than, you know, Gilmour's guitar. So I kind of got tired of it, really. Now I'm sure, looking back on it, you know, some changing, experimenting with different strings, and maybe, you know, even eventually getting it mic'd up, or, you know, pick up under the saddle or something, you know, a piezo thing, that might have made some difference, rescued it from non-tinkliness, but I didn't know back then. So right now what I've got to do is get this sort of arranged under here in a way that's going to be easy to work with. Yes, that's perfect. Alright, I'm going to do sticky tape, which I've done a few times in the last couple of days already. It's really useful, this stuff, for those radius blocks, and, you know, doing the re-radiusing of this neck. It was a very simple way of making your own double-sided sandpaper, sticky back sandpaper. This is overhanging and not working, not coming off the way I want. Anyway, so with this is a bit new territory for me because of the because I've not used this fret material before, or this Evo stuff. So I don't know how it's going to behave from here on. Like I said, it felt more brittle in actually cutting the using the cutters. Definitely had a different feel. But hopefully, I'm hoping that it's going to behave fairly dependably when it comes to filing it down. That's the main thing. What I also know is that the stainless steel fret, I already know that it is harder, and it's going to be harder to work. But with a bit of luck, I won't have too much to do, so let's have a feel, or a bit of that. Will that do? Yeah, I think that will do. Okay, let's get on to this last three. Now I'm going to be obviously very careful. This is supported, and it's really important to get this support under here, because it would be all too easy to break this overhanging piece of old, you know, 40-odd-year-old, nearly 40-year-old rosewood, to break it if it didn't have this support. So it's really critical that this support is as strong as it can be in order to get this pressed in. In you go, thank you. I'm just watching how it flexes while I'm doing this, so it's okay, it's all within safe limits. So this, what I'll do for this tonight is I'll carry on, maybe off once I've cleaned up a little bit, I'll carry on and do some filing, get this down to size, and then we'll trim it with the edge beveling thing. Hopefully that won't destroy, it's not so hard that it'll destroy that file, fingers crossed. And then I'll, as far as I can, I will tidy up the edges of the frets and take away any sharp edges. And then Malcolm is coming over tomorrow, and as it happens, he's going to bring a rivet, rivet gun thing, and hopefully we'll get to possibly, I don't know, maybe he might end up just leaving it with me, but the plan will be to use that to fit another rivet into this bridge, which is pulling up because it's missing one of its 3 rivets, or one of the 3 rivets is broken, I should say. Right, this can come off here for a minute. So we'll get to replace that rivet hopefully, but I can't do it until I've got some. This is going sideways again. Damn it! I can't do it until I've got the right clamps, and they are on order at the moment. Right, just get in there for a minute. Right, you're in. I had an email from somebody yesterday who has started off doing some fretwork on a guitar, on a Harley Benton maple telly, and had a high spot, or I think it might have been a ding or something on the fret, and went ahead and tried to sand it out, and then in doing so created a low spot. So he may be sending it this way for a kind of a setup, or a fret level and setup. But the issue with that will be how far down we would have to go to kind of bottom out the damage, or whether it's better to pull the fret altogether and put a new one in and work that one down to the level of the other ones in a way. So it's a kind of probably a better option of the two. So we shall see whether that comes around. I'm just going to try and line this up and give it a tap without it going all over the place. No, it's going all over the place. Wow. Right, I've just got it on the crown of the fingerboard as a holding point, but let's see if we can just get it. Yeah, squished it down all right. Okay, so that's the last fret in. Now with an electric guitar, typically, because I would be aiming for a very low playing action, whenever I fret an electric with new frets, then it almost invariably needs some fret leveling as well in the kind of final setup phase. It may be that with an acoustic, or often with an acoustic, the action tends to usually stay just outside of the zone where the amount of uneven frets that you typically will find, it tends to be just outside of where that comes into play and affects the action, or affects the frets. So which is not too bad. So it may be that we don't have to do any fret leveling. Now this is now really sticky. It's decided it's going to stay stuck. Come on. Holy. Sticky. I don't want to suddenly wrench it up and snap it off, so I'm going to employ a gentle prising motion to get rid of that. This double-sided tape is well sticky. Now this is where I don't want to cause any damage, so I'll try and just ease it away without, I just don't want to put too much force on that chunk of rosewood. And then we've got some sticky stuff to get rid of here. This is the stuff that's basically sitting on the underside of the scratch plate on this guitar. and it really is, it never seems to lose its stickiness, so I had no choice really but to just put another layer on top and use that. Okay, so we have our fretted, refretted guitar. Now, this can go away, and also turn this thing around because I don't need it anymore. Stick that on there for next time. This is what you have to do when you don't have much room to work in, but enough to get what you need to get done. Swing around and slam it back into place. There we go. Right, so here's the fun stuff. This is now going to be pretty much as stuck as it needs to be. First things first, get me a couple of, or a metal file or two. I'm going to see, let's have a look at how easy this stuff is to take down. Hopefully, I'd like to get rid of most of the excess off here this way, and have as little to do with the edge beveling thing as possible, but also have to be careful not to overshoot and gouge any wood. So it's just me really get as much of the big stuff off. Now this stuff is, I don't know if I can feel any difference in working it right now as to whether, I know it is harder, it's renowned to be harder than standard nickel steel in terms of its wear, but right now it's cutting like fret metal, so it's not too unusual. Basically I'm just going to go along all the way along, taking off as much as possible, and then I will employ this. But what I do is I'm going to avoid the edging, the downward edging thing. I don't like that. I'm just going to do the same job but using the bevel. So I'm going to kind of shorten it with the bevel and keep going until it's also pulled into the edge, but it stops short of damaging all the any lacquer along the edge here, which this, if you use it in the 90-degree mode, you almost invariably end up damaging that. So I was going to say I'll stop this off, but actually I might as well just keep going, because it's not like I'm in the habit of stopping or editing videos in pursuit of brevity or anything like that. Somebody made I think the person, the contributor whose video whose contribution I hid from the channel, seemed really surprised that on my video titled something like Gibson Les Paul Setup, they were shocked and horrified that I didn't just do a 5-minute setup, but in fact I'd taken the whole guitar apart, according to them, and they were really unhappy about that, which is funny really, because taking the guitar apart, quote unquote, is, you know, to make sure this, that and the other works, and checking things out. That's what I do, and actually it's what a customer is happy for, not just to have, you know, a bare minimum of a setup, but I check the electrics, or if I can, I'll take the tuners off and clean the headstock, give it a polish, get in and amongst all the tuners and stuff. So it's just funny that you know, a viewer who's hungry for a set piece of information was really annoyed that you know, I would give that service to a paying customer. How weird. It's funny, you know, so many people can only see things from their own point of view. You know, if they're coming to watch a video about how to set up a Gibson, they can only see their own agenda. You know, I need that video, and anything else is wrong. So this is it's not easy to work with a big file like this. I try to sort of keep it as balanced as I can, otherwise you do end up like I just did there. You get a little sort of scuff on the fingerboard, but as you in these wider apart frets, it's very difficult to use this without that happening once in a while. But it is a balance between trying to take off more bulk with this, or getting a head start with this file. When you get down to the closer together frets, obviously it gets less likely that your file blade falls in between and hits the fingerboard edge. But now you notice I haven't gone anywhere near the stainless steel one yet, because I'll be completely straight with you, I have never yet in my life, apart from cutting this, I've never yet worked a stainless steel fret. So this is going to be the first time, and you know, it's going to give me a pretty good idea in a minute of what the difference is. And the thing I can tell you, there you go, another scuff on the edge. The thing I can tell you is that I've been led to believe the difference is huge. So if I actually do it and then find out that in fact it's not that extreme, it'll be an anticlimax. I've also been led to believe that it'll pretty much destroy my tools straight from the get-go. So similarly, if it doesn't, I'll be mighty relieved. Come on, bite. So nearly there. Okay, let's go down the end here and have a feel of this stainless steel. If it comes off, I'll be amazed. If it doesn't do anything at all, we'll be, oh, what are we going to do? Okay, it's cutting. It's cutting. Let's cut back to the nearly to the edge. That's all right. I can see the profile of the fret now, so it's quite a big chunky one, so that should be fine. Right up here at this end, I've got to be very careful not to cut the headstock while I'm doing this. So I'm sort of trying to guide it with my knuckle of my finger as well. feels just about okay actually. That's not far off. Okay, well, so what's the big deal with stainless steel? That rhymes. Now looking at this, I'm not yet sure. I'll check when I go in the house. Check to see whether just how much difference there is in size. It's a little bit bigger. It's a little bit wider too, which is fine. Okay, so here we go for the rounding or the angle cutting. If you've never used one of these before, I have one piece of advice to you. Two pieces. One, maybe consider just clamping down one end of the guitar so you don't have to try and hold it and position it all in one go. And then start light, just to kind of take off any obvious sticky out obstructions that are going to catch. And then the next secret, and it is cutting all right actually, the next secret is what you have to do is you have to with your hand you have to produce a combination of two forces. You've got to have a downward force to keep this thing firmly on the frets, and you have to have a this way force to keep it against the edge, so that you're taking this down every time. And that together, that force and that force equals that. So you're kind of going in at the angle like this. And if you do too much this way, what happens is this thing skips up and over. I've done it so many times. Skips up and over the frets, and the file will gouge the living daylights out the top of what would otherwise be a fine set of clean frets. So it's a really scary point in time. You have to just restrain yourself from going too quick, and absolutely make sure that if anything there's more downward force than a crossward force. You could try and sort of you could try and hold it so it can't skip, but probably just better to try and lighten it up a little bit. Don't hurry. If you hurry, the chances are you put too much force into it one way or another, and that's when its tendency is to skip. So you've got to just be ready for repetitious stuff, but ensuring that the force is always more downwards than sideways, and hope that it does its movement this way over time in its own time. It's nothing wrong with it clattering like this. The front edge of this will always hit the next fret. It can't do anything but. It's always going to run into it. But the lower or closer you get to finishing, the less it clatters really. Basically you just have to keep going until such times as it literally stops cutting, and you'll know it, but it's quite a way off yet. So I probably will stop this because this is going to go on forever and it's boring for you as well as for me. Lots of little gold particles coming off, but this is the bit, like I said, patience is critical here, because if you try and rush it you'll do the skip over thing, and I have ruined. And it's not the end of the world. If you skip over, you're going to have to do fret leveling to get rid of these scratches. And if they're, I mean, this is unforgiving. You can see by the shape of this thing, that will absolutely scrape the hell out of the top of the frets, and you will be taking a lot of metal off to just get to the bottom of those scratches. So at this stage in the game, more, longer is better. See that cork going the other way, and if you have to, come back in with this and take a bit more of the excess off with that, but whatever you do, don't rush it. So I'm going to carry on, and I'll come back to you when this is all done and I'm happy with how it feels. Hey, oh look, sorry, I have to apologise. I've jumped ahead in time really and didn't record some bits. Now what didn't I record? I didn't record the levelling of the frets, the refitting of the neck, yeah, and the riveting of the rivet. So let me just apologise profusely. I know it's profusely, okay. Anyway, so yeah, I just have to accept that I was wrong. All right. So the truth is, I was just having a bit of downtime. You know, just let me have a bit of downtime, would you? Now, what's a really annoying thing is for some reason I've only got 2 of the brown widgets. Did it come with 3 or did it only have 2 in the first place? Oh, chocolate eggs. I seem to only have 2 of the brown plasticky cap things. Can't have gone anywhere. But no, I only have 2 in my collection of bits. Oh well. So we have a nice fresh looking rivet sticking its face out there, showing its face to the world. Right, okay, so look, where are we with this guitar? We are in the sort of position now to refix. Well, the neck's refixed. I've put the shim back in. We're going to need to refit the tuners and get ready to put the strings on, and then basically set it up from there, because all things being incredibly equal, it should just be a matter of stringing and adjusting the action. Now I'm just right here now, I'm just balancing up this excuse me, balancing up this nut to where I want it to sit, which is, remember, its purpose. Oh, hang on a minute. Oh, I've just made a mistake. What a plonker. Its purpose. If I could just go back 2 steps. What a fool. I knew I hadn't done something. Get it off before it sticks. Yeah, right. The purpose of the nut is to space the strings, and to do that it has to obviously be cut in the right way, but what we also need is for it to be at the right height, and I had thought it was at the right height, but I was wrong. So what I'll do is I'm going to just clean out this sticky super glue for a minute. So we've got a clean what's the word, slot, and I can also put some bit of sanding going in there if I need to. Sorry, that was a bit bit hasty of me. Now the idea is that this has to come, I thought I got it pretty spot on, but clearly I don't. So this needs to be high enough basically to just guide the strings over the 0 fret, and that's the sort of challenging bit, because if it's too tall, which it was about to be, what will happen is the strings will kind of launch over the top of that 0 fret and do no good whatsoever. So I'm looking at this for an indication of where it needs to be. So I can get a micro doofer. Sorry, that was rushing ahead without thinking. Price you can sometimes pay. So I'm going to take a measurement from the very bottom of this low E, bottom of the low E in respect of the underside of the nut, and it's 3.11. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take the same aforementioned bone duplicate or replica that I've cut. Now in reality this could be a little lower and it would still do the job, because it's most important that it's important that it's lower rather than higher. And what I'll do is I'll go to the other end and I'll just do a check on here, which actually looks about the same. Perhaps a little tiny bit higher. 3.29, and again I'll make a measurement off the bottom here, and then we'll mark up a line. You can't see this very well, sorry about that. We'll mark up a line across the bone nut. Basically it shows us how much we've got to take off for this to work. Okay, so that's a good start point. And with a bit of luck, we should be able to get this down to size. And like I said, the main thing is that the nut has to guide the strings spacing, so it's horizontal spacing across the neck that's important, across the radius of the neck. So I'm just going to draw a kind of guide on this edge as well, so I can see approximately. It doesn't have to be the most accurate thing in the world, because we can afford a little bit, if anything, a little bit over cut. But we'll aim for a clean cut. Now what I could do is I could put this in, but I'm not going to. It's just about enough. I could have done it in the vise and cut it that way. So what I tend to do is once I've got it what I think is vertical, I tend to try and move my body more than the nut, so I can just keep everything at a right angle, and then I'll press down a bit more on the other end if it needs balancing out, and I want it to be a nice 90-degree angle. And just keep stopping every now and then to double check that it's getting where I want it to. Right. Close, very close indeed. Let's just compare the two. This is a very wide We've got a very wide slot on this one, so we may need to widen the slot as we put this on to stop the string sticking, although I have already checked it once. So this old girl is in a sort of, I don't know what the word would be, tired isn't a fair description, well worn condition. She's done a lot of good service. Now I was thinking this time round of, once we got the tuners in, of possibly gluing them in place, because gluing the tiny dab of glue, because these things fell off and ran away. The ferrules. So let's see what's what. There's a lot of space because these tuners aren't exactly a match for this hole, funnily enough. Too thin, posts are too thin for this, but still, let's get the thing basically in place, following the existing holes. There's some spare holes that I filled, and I could dab a little bit of amber lacquer on afterwards when all's done. I think these are the right way up. So, having done what I did when off camera was, because I saw one or two slightly high frets in the whole rack. I sort of preempted any problems by doing a radius block fret level on the new frets, which is something I do when I know I've got enough new fret material. I don't like to use a radius block on you know, a guitar, second-hand guitar that's come in, or a customer's guitar that's come in for setup. And this this is something that somebody asked me in YouTube comments this morning, which is, they were saying that after having done a refret, they felt that the banana truss rod fret leveling method wasn't wasn't adequate to reduce or lower some of the individual high frets that they found after a refret. And one of the things to point out about that is that that's not really a failing of the fret, the truss rod fret leveling method. It's the focus of attention in a way should be on the condition of the frets as pressed in. So it kind of points towards the amount of work you have to do to prepare the surface of the fingerboard to receive the new frets, and in particular, probably the most important of all, the condition of the slot. And to that, sorry, I'll finish what I was going to say. So that has the that has the single biggest impact on frets ending up sitting, one or two frets sitting high, because they don't quite press into the slots, because there's some detritus left behind from previous fretting, or something like glue residue or something like that, or even sawdust, or wood dust or whatever. And I did an interesting little test, because I myself, it was an interesting prompt, that comment, because a single high looking fret on this yesterday prompted me to go ahead and do a radius block level, which often I wouldn't do, but I did in this case. And it points towards something that I sometimes struggle with bound or edged guitars, filled edge guitars, where the not on this case actually, but older guitars. I often can struggle to get the slots cleaned out completely and get the new frets to seat properly. Now this one, I'm not really sure why it happened, because I had had all the time in the world to, as I did, to recut the holes with a saw. Sorry, recut the slots with a saw. I also cleaned them out as best I could, and as you can see, I re-radiused the fingerboard. So by all accounts, nothing here should have got stuck in pressing. So I'm really not quite sure why this did. Now I'm going to get a little bit of glue here, and I'm going to just dab these ferrules, because I want them to stay in as opposed to come out. Like I said, they were sort of dropping out and falling over the floor, so the wood's a little bit loose there, so I'm going to just add a little bit of glue to ease the process. So yeah, so even when you go to quite an extreme to prepare the materials, the thing that may have caused that particular fret to stand up may have been perhaps I didn't quite prepare the fret. I didn't need that much. I didn't quite prepare the fret enough, and it may just have ended up sticking up as a result. So not ideal. Anyway, but the point to the commenter on YouTube is that you really have to make sure that the surface is all, the fingerboard is all in order, and the slots in particular are correct. Now I just want to find a rest for this a minute. That's not deep enough. So what am I looking for here? I'm looking for something I haven't got. It isn't going to work, is it? Maybe that will work. That might work. Yeah, so preparing that's good. Preparing the slots. And so they got me thinking yesterday about the number of times that on bound guitars, bound neck guitars, I've found myself facing yeah, having a feeling that it's just almost impossible to clean out the slots adequately. So, and then found myself having some issues with kind of a little bit of unevenness when all said and done, requiring some, you know, a bit more effort in fret leveling. So what I did yesterday is I decided to get a very, very fine Dremel drill bit and deliberately sort of tried to mangle the end of it so it was a little bit flattened basically. I crimped the end. I mean, we're talking about a 0.1 or 0.2 of a millimetre drill bit, absolutely tiny. So I kind of got that, and I went into the edges, just mainly up and down the edges, and I basically prepped a neck, this one here, to test it out. Now I was going to refret that at some point anyway, and I have got a use for it in the not too distant future, so it was a good opportunity to try it out. So with this Dremel, this kind of customized 0.2 or whatever millimetre bit in the Dremel, I went into the very edges just behind the sealed off fret ends, or in the case of a bound neck, inside the binding. And what I found was quite interesting. I could feel that even on these frets that I just, or on the slots where I just pulled out the original frets, which typically aren't heavily glued in, and typically I wouldn't expect to find tons of detritus and gunge. What I found was, or noticed, was that the drill was cutting into something solid. So if I were to draw it like this, if you imagine the fret slot, that's not very good, but let's say that's the sort of level of the fingerboard, and then you have this fret slot there, and then you have whatever, this is either binding or let's call it, you know, the lacquered fill at the end, and you're trying to preserve that. So typically what you're doing is you're planning to put in a what do you call it, you know, an undercut fret. So there's your undercut fret ready to go in like that. Yeah, so you're going to kind of push that into there. And what I found is when I was drilling the slot to clean it, I found that drilling into here and here, right next to close to the edge, the drill was actually drilling into something. So it felt that even though I'd done my best to clean it out, and there was no reason why these frets from the original factory fretting should have gunge in the corner, they clearly did. And then I kind of let the drill sort of work, and then I sort of dragged it sideways to clean out this, you know, as much as possible, clean out this, whatever this little rubble was in the corner. But it's so difficult to get that rubble out, and I've decided from now on I'm going to, whenever I'm doing a bound or edged, lacquer edged neck, and I'm trying to preserve either the edges or the binding, I'm going to definitely drill into that corner and take the drill. I mean, you can't get a mini router bit in there. Well, they're way too big, so I'm going to have to use a drill. But for these purposes, it will be adequate to get right into there and clear out into a straight corner so that this will fit. Because the only other alternative, I don't want to do it, is that you might end up sort of having to cut this overhang miles back until you think you can be sure you've got a clean entry into the slot. And then the problem with that is you tend to get a sort of bit of lifting of this end here. It's very easy for that to either deform or bend to get it, and then you end up with a little gap in here which feels crappy. And also you sometimes get the ends sticking up, which end up having to be flattened off in the leveling process. So again, it's about whatever it can do right now to get this seating with as little overhang as is absolutely required. And you don't need much, and the less you can put in, the tidier your ends are going to be, or the neater they're going to sit close to the edge here, and the less of a gap, and the less you're going to need to fret level them off and so on. So this, anyway, the point being, I was surprised in every single one of the slots there was this rubble in the corners from way back in the original fretting in the factory, and I can't really explain why that would be, because even if they used glue, I don't see why it would have collected in the corners. But anyway, it's just taught me that's what I'm going to do heretofore, here and after. So, because there is nothing as satisfying as a set of frets that go in and mate up with the surface straight off without requiring a bunch of extra fret leveling work. You just don't want to be having to do that if you don't have to. This is quite snug because it's got a little bit of extra glue kind of percolating in there, so I'm just going to try and smooth it down a little bit. That's the wrong one. This is pretty much what I use my fret rockers for these days. Oh heck, I haven't got sandpaper on that one. I was going to say I use my fret rockers for cleaning out the nut slots, because they're very good for that. I don't actually use them for fret rocking. I'm just going to scrape a bit, see if I can remove a bit of the excess glue and get this to sit in easier, smoother. Of course I want it to sit firmly in there so that we're not sticking up. Now the question is, when we look through here, are we going to, will the frets sit, sorry, will the strings sit on the 0 fret? And it's kind of hard to see just yet. I think that's fractionally, they're going to sit fractionally above, so we still need to take it down a little bit. And in a sense it doesn't really, like I said, it doesn't really matter if it goes further down. It's better that it's under. We don't want the frets, we need there to be some pressure on, or some pressure, downward force on the 0 fret. We don't want the strings to kind of not sit on the fret cleanly. Like you wouldn't want the strings to pass through the nut without touching, or without putting a downward force on the nut. It's critical for the tone that they press downwards, and the same with the 0 fret. So it's not as simple as it looks, this 0 fret business. The nut that you end up making is a bit of a challenge. Now, basically, to begin with, I've kind of copied the pattern of the slots from the original nut. And that's the important thing, to get the horizontal spread right. But of course, we have to make sure as well that the strings are far enough down so they do sit with some pressure on the 0 fret whilst being guided. But we also need to make sure that it's as best as possible done before we put this on, because we don't really have a lot of room. Once we chuck the strings on, and if we find this doesn't work, then I've got a couple of options, or I've got a couple of chances to gently lift the strings out, get the nut out, make adjustments. But you know, we can only really test this when the strings are going back on. So I'm not going to glue it just yet. What I'm going to do is I'm going to head towards the point where we put the strings on. So we've got now the old girl's teeth. And I'm not going to, I mean, they're ragged, so I'm not even going to bother trying to clean them or do anything. We've got our elixirs here. I really am not quite, I'm surprised that Elixir don't put their strings in tin foil stuff, you know, with some, you know, desiccant silica gel, like other brands do. It would be a really sensible thing to do, because they can go off. So we have the adjustable saddle down at this end. It's the original saddle. We've got everything ready. Now I've got, I asked Roger what gauge of strings he was after, and he said 10s, and I think he was kind of referring predominantly to electric guitar. So what I did was, instead of the sort of standard light 1253s, I got a hybrid set, which is 1152, I believe. So we're going to go from, you know, nearly a 10 down to a 52. So it's going to feel going to feel nice and light. So pretty much the first thing that's going to happen is, as I put on this string, I want to go pull back full length to give it its normal wind on that I want, and this is going to give me a sort of first indicator about how everything sits. And obviously I want to stress these strings as little as possible before they get played in anger. So my first check is to see how this is passing through here and what sort of contact they're making on the 0 fret. So the truth is, we probably want a bit of a cleaner cut through there. Remember that the fret, the 0 fret, is purely for spacing on the 0 fret guitar. I need something slightly finer than this. Yeah, it's for spacing purposes only, and so what we've got no need to have the nut slot dragging or too tight. Everything should be kind of oversized, if anything. So this is still snug in here, so let's just make sure that's good. So what I can do, if I find where I put them, oh, they're over here. I'm going to get out this set of cutters for a minute, and I'm going to, with my bare hands, I'm going to gently pick some randomly. I'm going to gauge some of these cutters files, and I'm just going to cut down to ensure that this is wide enough, and I'm just checking with this, there you go, wide enough and deep enough to do the job. And I say, it doesn't, we've got quite a lot of leeway in terms of accuracy, so I'm going to sort of jump between these and make sure. I'm going to just do it over on here a minute. Probably would be better to stick this thing in a vise, to be honest. Tighten it up. Don't. I'm usually good at catching things, don't normally let them drop all the way, so let's use a little holding device for a minute. Really, we're just looking for basically the width we were looking for, just to kind of clear everything. That one to that one, to that one. And I say better wider than smaller. And I'll just jump across to these. And obviously we don't want the thing to cut through the saddle altogether, but it's got to be deep enough to work. Let's have a look. So again, we'll just put it back in here now, and the original nut was short anyway, as this one is. Okay. And again, this all comes down to how well this is hitting the string. Sorry, hitting the 0 fret, and I think that feels pretty good actually. Now we have a sort of basic setting at the moment on this bridge action, which is too high, so I'll still take this down. That's the great thing about these old EKOs, you can probably go down to nothing, and providing the providing the fret leveling is good, which it wasn't a precision fret leveling, but it was a reasonable fret leveling, we should be able to get a nice action out of this. Now, I'm going to hold off fixing the nut in place just this minute. Get all these strings on and start to load the neck. Now, I did the fret leveling in this case because it was a sort of what I call a crude, and I don't mean that in a way that I want people to write comments and say, I cannot believe you're doing crude work and charging. I'm not charging customers for this anyway, but it's not crude in the sense that you're thinking, or you may be thinking. When I say crude, I mean it's a first pass kind of fret level, and it's leveling with the neck passively flattened, which is the method that most luthiers, guitar people use, full stop. So it's what I call crude as compared to, or in contrast to, precision, which is what I mean when I use the truss rod, or the banana tool as I call it. So I did a quote-unquote crude fret leveling on this, and as such the neck wasn't under load, so I would expect not to be able to set an electric guitar style playing action on this guitar, because I haven't done it under compression. And if, for example, Roger was the kind of guy who had to have an electric guitar style playing action on his acoustic, then I would have gone on to do precision fret leveling with some sacrificial strings on board. But A, he isn't, and B, it's my experience that most acoustic guitars set up very well without the action ever being low enough to wander into the area where uneven frets have an impact. So, put simply, it means you can get a great acoustic guitar playing action usually without need for precision fret leveling. So, as I said before, the reason I leveled these frets at all was to remove one or two high frets. Okay. Now, this is a very low action at the moment, so I'm not intending to keep it there, but we're just starting out with it there. It would be extraordinarily low for an acoustic guitar, but I like to begin low and then we'll go upwards. And it's also somebody else made a comment on one of my older videos saying that I had talked about compromising on a particular string, sorry, on a particular fret on a particular string, and they were disappointed that I would compromise, i.e. by slightly raising the action. And I think again the thing I kind of want to point out is that the fret leveling and setup with such tiny clearances and such kind of variations in how guitars are between different guitars is always a compromise of some sort or other. And it's not a bad thing to say it's a compromise. It's part of the course. So you are, depending on how the guitar neck is, how the action is, the condition of the frets, the age of the frets. So for example, if in that situation I had all the fret material in the world, seagulls, eh? If I had all the fret material in the world to play with, or a lot of fret material, brand new frets for example, I'm not saying that guitar didn't have, but let's say I had high frets, then I might feel comfortable working a particular fret, or using that method to take the frets down to reach or iron out a particular problem on a particular fret. If there wasn't a lot of fret material, then I wouldn't necessarily want to go there, and I may feel that for that guitar, because of the limitations on the fret life, we might have to compromise to some degree. Okay, so what we have here is we have frets. Is that sitting on the 0 fret? It's almost it's not quite right. It's holding it just slightly off. It's hard to see, but so I'm going to get my files out. Now these are oversized 10s, so they should work okay with this set at the high end. Now what I just want to do is I want to clear out. I'm going to do it. I'm going to just take this action, so it'll take this slot so that it will. The problem with this, that is the problem with this, is you can't do it without. With this gauge of 0 fret, we can't get this down without without just slightly cutting into the. I don't want to cut into the fret. It feels like we have to go just slightly into the. All right, let's do this. We have to go down a little bit, but the problem is to have a low action on this guitar, you have to have the strings exiting and almost touching the wood behind, so it might even be a smart move to take that off or just to lower that a little bit, because it's just going to get in the way of what we're trying to do here. Okay, so I'm going to wish I had a little vise here instead of that one over there. I'm going to put this on here. You can't really see it. I'm going to have to try and just carefully take these down again. I'm going to go backwards towards the back of the thing. And of course, it's difficult to get this thing in all the way in without leaving half the nut dangling out. I'm going to go with my 13 and I'm going to cut the slot here. It's really difficult because I need it to stick up further whilst also gripping the actual nut. It's almost not enough to hold onto. Okay, that's my 13. And I'll go with a 17 for the next one. The next one, 24. Let's see if it works just for these. Hopefully I only need to do it for these top 3. I need to let out more. Yeah, 0 frets, eh? Cool. What fun they are. We'll go tighten from the middle so it stays in the same place, hopefully. Okay, first thing is the action down here is too low, so that's going to be messing up the reading after this, so I'm going to make a point of adjusting that. This is okay, let's go up with this. Okay, so we've got very low action still. It's interesting. Let me cut off this excess. So what I'm finding is it's appearing to me that this 0 fret here, even though it's bigger quite a bit bigger than the other one. It's kind of saying it might not even be big enough, so I don't know if we can get much more bigger than a true spinal tap. It's the spirit of the word, but let's see. Let's see. Let's get the action check and set first, and then we'll judge from there. It should play even on the same size gauge. That's the truth of it. Be close, but it should play. So I'm not quite sure what's getting in the way. So there's my everything there. That's over there. So the action will be, typically, might be something like 2. Okay, it's getting better because the curve of the neck is obviously an important part of it. So straight off, what have we got? That's going to be too high. Well, we're running here on this last fret, just over 2, which is higher than I like on an acoustic. So let's drop that in a bit more. Let's do the same down here and see what we've got when everything's... Okay, so that's, let's check everything we might have. So that's showing up, that's giving me about 1mm clearance over here, so maybe it's not that much more than the actual, but very low first fret action, and it's kind of down just a little bit lower than I want on the first fret. And if I have a nice low action, that is. I'm not going to do massive stretching just now, I'm just letting the guitar kind of settle in a bit. interesting. What is it with that first one? That's really interesting. Everything else is perfect height. Just that first fret here is a fraction higher than the others. Interesting. That's taken me a little bit by surprise that I mean, everything is it's a low first fret action whichever way you cut or slice it. So reality is I might be really ideally looking for a taller fret than that, which is I really don't know. I don't think I've got anything bigger than that. Much as I would like to. I might have a sort of trawl around, but I really don't think I've got anything chunkier than that stuff. I'm using the highest, widest stuff. So there might be another one that I can find. Everything plays. It's just that 0 fret height on this one. Weird. That shouldn't be like that. I don't want to file it down, although I could do just right on the edge there. I'd rather replace it with one, but. Raise the action up to cure that. Okay, so a short delay while I find me some slightly higher wire and find it quickly, which is a pity, but it's the way it goes. Everything else fine except for that size of wire. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to find a piece of it and do a measurement. Well, I've got my measurements here, haven't I? We are working with, let's take a picture. Wide, highest, wide, highest. See, not much good if I can't go higher. Maybe somebody else makes one that goes higher. Still, that was the whole point of going higher. I don't want to have to use tiny flat wire. I mean, that's a nice size gauge for this guitar. Anyway, so it's kind of done, but a small modification probably needed. I'll go and do a bit of a search now and then come back out when I find it. So, which means this spare 0 fret might not be the most. I just want to double check. Is that actually what I used? The right side. It is what I used. Highest, widest, same stuff. Exact same stuff. Yeah. Right, I'm going to go and do a little bit of a search and see what I can find. I'll be back shortly. Just a quick update on Roger's EKO. I've ordered some more Evo fret wire, and I've gone up a tiny bit in the gauge. So we're very low on all of these, and we're just, for some reason due to the shaping of the fingerboard, I don't quite know, but we are just under optimal on this top E. So I've gone another 0.1 of a millimeter, actually 0.12 of a millimeter up on some more fret wire. It would take a couple of days to arrive, but the nice thing about that is it's going to be the same Evo Gold as the rest of it, so it's going to be in keeping, and also then I'll have a set that I can do another guitar with for my own purposes, so that's cool. It's not a waste of money, it's just a little delay. Anyhow, see you in a bit. So I think this is recording. I'll double check. I'm back to front. The camera's in a different place from normal, so I'm sort of hoping it's going to stay there. Yeah. Anyway, look. Here we have the old Eko Ranger VI, and all said and done, we've got to pretty close to where I wanted to get, actually. Up close. So what we've got in the end, a few different things happened. First of all, the glue down that I did here hasn't stayed down. It's really hard to do without taking the entire bridge arrangement off, which I didn't want to do in the first place because it can be quite destructive. It's quite a long process, so I chose not to do that, particularly since the action wasn't really raised up that high anyway. It wasn't a deal breaker problem really. So really most of the focus has been on getting the refret done and ending up with, I did a small shim to the neck to just get me the action and the range of adjustment I wanted here on the adjustable bridge. But I think what we've got is a very nice sounding old beast. There's just a few little blemishes here and there, but that's, you know, it's got lots of wear and tear in it, this old girl. Anyway, so here we have, since I kind of did the last bit of video, what I've done is I've changed out the 0 fret for a bigger one. I bought some really chunky Evo Evo Gold jumbo wire. The original stuff wasn't quite, the original StewMac jumbo wire I used wasn't quite enough, so I used some of this, which is absolutely monstrously big, but it's perfect for the 0 fret arrangement on here. So I changed that over, and while I was at it, I also replaced the nut. I wasn't happy with one of the gaps on the slot, on one of the slots, so I changed that. Right now the nut is actually just placed in there, it's not glued in, so depending on how Roger wants it, he can push it one way or another depending on the clearance he wants. So, but it doesn't move anywhere under tension, so that's cool. So basically, you know, that's it done. I put a new rivet in there, and it has lifted on these corners. It's lifted back up a very small amount, back to where it was, to be honest. And I don't know if it's short of pulling it all off and doing a complete job on it. There's not really a lot else to do. You know, partial glue obviously isn't enough to hold it down. There is a little bit of kind of curving here, but not that much. I thought I'd got enough glue under there, but presumably not. But there you go, live and learn. Anyway, sounding very pretty. That's Space Odyssey, isn't it? Ground control to Major Tom. I was thinking of playing that one the other day, actually. So there we go. I've kind of kept an eye on this from yesterday. It seems to have stayed in tune pretty well now. Yeah, occasional tweak needed, but it feels nice. You know, in the future, it might be worth pulling the whole bridge off and redoing all of the rivets and the gluing. But hey, it's got a refret for now, so it's got a new lease of life until that becomes unplayable sometime in the future. Anyway, there you go, my second ever guitar, the old Eko Ranger VI. Just another 20 years of life in the neck there. Feeling nice, looking pretty good. You know, same old battle-scarred old girl, as you can see. But hopefully Roger will enjoy playing it this weekend at his gig, and I don't think it will feel that much different anyway, so that's a nice thing. So there you go, thanks for sticking with it and watching this one. These things only cost 80 quid new in 1980, so it's kind of a lot of labour of love to give this thing a greater lease of life. But as I say, the bridge will need attention one day, but hopefully not for a while yet. And like I said, there's a fair bit of adjustment room left in here over the next couple of years anyway. There we go. Alright, see you again for another reloved guitar in the not too distant future. And I'll say goodbye to this fab old girl inscribed with my name on it, on the old bolt plate on the back there, neck plate. So Soundeeks 1983 Daytona Beaches, going back up to London to Roger, and hope she gets many more happy gigs out of her. See you again soon.